It's working? All right. So we'll get started as people kind of, I think, are mostly here. We'll have a few stragglers, I think, that'll be coming in after other events and meetings. But just wanted to thank all of the residents of Old Town and property owners for being out here tonight. I know it's taken a lot to get here. And so I guess just without, we're going to talk about a lot tonight. But what I will say from the very beginning of all this is, between Doug Courtney and Randy Roethlisberger at the county and myself and Joe Fernaro, and we have a new economic development person with Eddie Eckert, we are going to continue to, pursue any kind of grant dollars available out there. So you're going to see some exorbitant costs tonight on these sheets, right? Some things that we've all been dreading throughout the last few years. So we're going to talk about kind of real quickly how we got here, where we're at now, and then kind of what to expect just in terms of timeline, construction, costs, ultimate assessments, and when all that stuff's going to come online, and then what we're doing in the meantime, in the interim, to hopefully, again, find some of that funding to help offset some of those costs for all of our residents. So first and foremost, thank you for being out here to everybody. So just real quickly, in 2014, the Lake County Health Department was notified of effluent going into our local streams, obviously with high E. coli counts. In 2017 and 18, the health department came out and started doing smoke testing, notifying the residents in the area that they wanted to, be able to access properties and do that smoke testing to find out exactly what properties and what septics were failing. There was not a super high rate of participation in that, and ultimately the health department had to turn the situation over to the EPA because there wasn't that compliance, and we didn't have enough numbers and knowledge of not a true representation of what was failing, and so the health department finally had to turn it over to the EPA. That's just kind of protocol. So in August of 2019, the city was delivered findings and orders from the EPA. At that point, the city did pass a resolution for two things, or passed a resolution to allow the mayor at the time to enter into negotiations with the EPA to discuss timelines in terms of how much time they were going to give us. And then also with that, there was so we also had to agree or not agree to the findings and orders. So the city council passed a resolution accepting the findings and orders as it was presented to us, and at that time the administration went ahead and signed also the findings and orders. Well, in January of 2020, shortly after I took office, we got a call from an attorney at the Ohio EPA, and that attorney informed us that we were actually supposed to do one or the other. So you sign the findings and orders and the agreement to those terms in that timeline that the EPA had set forth, or you negotiate. So, we expressed that there must have been confusion on the city's end, and would the EPA be willing to allow us to come back and negotiate to what those terms and that timeline would be. The EPA fortunately did agree to that because those findings and orders delineated a much shorter timeline. So fast forward to July of 2020. So in March of 2020, the Ohio EPA did propose that new timeline for findings and orders. And so by July of 2020, the city felt like, the 5 years or so that we had been granted or afforded to stretch the length of time before the project was, on your doorstep, and construction completed and the assessments to begin. We felt like that was the best we can do. And truthfully, I asked the EPA for another year, and they pretty much laughed at me and said, "We've kind of given you enough, right?" So we did. The city of Kirtland did pass and sign the ordinance to agree to those findings and orders last year, and so since then. I know we had an informational meeting last January, I think, via Zoom at the time. And so we left that meeting saying hopefully the next time we could do this, we could be in person. So Doug Courtney is here from the city of Kirtland. He's our engineer. And Randy Roethlisberger is from the county, county utilities. And we obviously have two gentlemen from the health department that their work really was in the beginning of all this. So now it's Doug and Randy's team that are really going to be working to initiate and execute the project. We also have Joe Finaro obviously here. Joe's our service director and always has the pulse on, what the project's going to entail, and obviously it's going to be helping Doug to oversee along with the county as they run this project coming forward. So I know everyone's interested in timeline, but everyone's also interested in costs, and so we're going to get into both of those things tonight. With timeline, what's that construction going to mean to the residents of Old Town? So again, back to how I opened this up, the city of Kirtland is bound and determined to, find some additional dollars in other places, to do whatever we can to help mitigate this extraordinary burden on the residents of Old Town, the property owners of Old Town. So I thank everybody for bearing with us and being patient all along, and I thank you in advance for continuing that patience, and just know that, if I was living in Old Town and if I was in your shoes, I'd be very concerned for my family and for my neighbors, just in terms of what the impact in dollars and cents is going to mean to us. So we're going to do our best to help. So nothing else for me for now. I'm going to turn it over to Doug Courtney, and then how this will work is Doug will go through some of the timeline, and then Randy will talk about the assessment process and what that'll mean. And then everyone, if you didn't get them, did everyone get a Q&A sheet here? We can pass out the remainder of these. If you want to pass these to whoever doesn't have them, I'm going to just pass them along. And so there's a lot of questions that have come up so far, and some of the answers that we've been able to come up with, the things that we do know. But obviously, not everything is going to be in those packets and those questions and answers, so there'll be time at the end for residents to ask those questions. Generally, we'll have a microphone that we can pass around. And then also, we will have an opportunity, if there's a question that you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the larger audience, don't feel bad. We're going to have an opportunity afterwards and beyond today even to approach the administration and Mr. Courtney, and then ultimately back to Randy Roethlisberger and the gentleman from the health department too. So nothing else for me for now. I'm going to pass it on to Doug Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Did we flip the slide? There we go. First thing I want to talk about is the project area. And the streets involved in the project. The project area covers Eisenhower, Elm, two properties on Bluff who have frontage on Maple, Caudry Street, Maple Street, Joseph, Fairview. So each property generally gets one assessment. There happen to be 13 parcels in the project area that are large enough to split into two conforming parcels under the R1 zoning district. So minimum lot size and frontage in the R1 district is 1,200 square feet for lot size, 60 feet of frontage. There are 13 lots that have an excess of 2,400 square feet of lot area and in excess of 120 square feet. Sorry. Okay, I'll start over. I'll try and speak a little more clearly. There are 13 parcels within the project area that are large enough to split into two conforming parcels within the R1 zoning district. Minimums in the R1 district are 12,000 square feet of land area and 60 feet of lot frontage. So 13 parcels have over 24,000 square feet of area and 120 square feet or more of frontage. These parcels, because they can be split, would get charged 2 assessments because it could ultimately be split, another house could be built and tied into the sewer. So knowing that folks with those larger parcels don't want more than 1 assessment, the 13 parcels are going to be given the opportunity to deed restrict their properties so they can't be split in the future. Okay? I have a list of those 13 parcels up here, and I have information from the law director on what you need to do and his contact information, so you can contact him to determine how you would do that. So considering those 13 parcels that would get 2 assessments, there'd be a total of 146 benefit units in the project area. If we assume all 13 of those parcels deed restrict their properties, that number comes down to 133. Any property reconfigurations within the project area, whether it be a lot consolidation, a lot split, or a deed restriction, should be completed by December 1st, based on the project schedule. I know some folks have already done some property reconfiguration, whether it be splits or consolidations, so we've been in touch with those folks. Project phasing. Phase 1 will be in 2022. That will include Eisenhower and Elm Street up to the intersection of Maple at Elm. Phase 2 is going to include Elm Street from Maple to the south end of Elm Street, Caudry Street, Maple Street, Joseph Street, and Fairview Avenue. That's how the project will be phased. Phase 2 will be in 2023. That's when construction will occur. Preliminary costs. These costs are still preliminary. The plans haven't been finalized. They're based on the current cost estimate and the current number of benefit units in the project area. The estimated total cost of the project is $3.2 million. Finance charges for the work over 20 years at a 5% interest rate amount to about $1.9 million, so a total amount to finance estimated at this point is about $5.1 million. Spread over the 133 benefit units, that's $38,338 per benefit unit, which amounts to about $1,900 annually and about $160 a month. Upfront costs for the homeowners to tie into the sewer, we estimate about $2,000 to abandon your septic system, about $3,000 to connect from the house to the sewer, tap-in fees from Lake County Department of Utilities, $5,571.64, and a one-time inspection fee of $100. So $10,671.64. The city has already secured grant money from the Ohio Public Works Commission in the amount of $250,000 grant and $150,000 loan. And we have applied for additional grant funding from the American Recovery Plan Act, which was part of the COVID relief funds. And we will continue to investigate other grant opportunities as we get closer to the project starting. The American Recovery Plan Act application included a request for 50% of the construction cost, 50% of the engineering costs, and 50% of the homeowner's estimated upfront costs. So we haven't heard whether or not that money has been awarded yet. We expect to hear by the end of the year if that money has been awarded. project schedule. The project, both phases are being designed both phases are being designed at one time. That's ongoing. Plans are into EPA for approval. Phase 1 construction is expected to start in May of 2022, finish in April of 2023. Phase 2 construction expected to start in March of 2023, complete in August of 2024. And then the deadline for residential connections to the sewer is in September of 2025, and that's based on the findings and orders the mayor mentioned. That is the end of our timeline under those findings and orders to have the sewer completed and have people connected. I'm going to hand things over to Randy Roethlisberger now, and he's going to go over assessment procedures.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mayor. How's the sound? Can you hear me okay, or is it a little bit better? All right. My name is Randy Roethlisberger. I'm the sanitary engineer for Lake County. I'm also the director of the Lake County Department of Utilities. In case you're not aware of our department, we have 3 different divisions. We treat drinking water and distribute it to about 100,000 people in Lake County every day. And we also run the solid waste facility, the landfill, out at the 2 and 20 split, where we dispose of about 800 tons of garbage every day from Lake County. And then we also have our wastewater division, where we treat about 15 million gallons a day from about 100,000 people within the county every single day. So that's what we do. We have about 200 employees that do that, and we have a few here tonight that will help out afterwards if you have questions. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the assessment procedure. The mayor talked a little bit about the history. Doug talked about the project and what we're doing. And now we'll get into a little bit of the project and what we have to do as a county, what the commissioners have to do in order to be able to assess a project like this. First step is information meetings. That's what we have tonight. We had one earlier, the mayor mentioned, in January. We also had an information meeting all the way back in 2018 where we talked about what was going on with this project. The health department kind of led that. And so now we're here, and if we have to have another information meeting, we will. The purpose of the information meeting is to give the residents as much information as we can, so at least the questions are answered when it comes time for the public hearing, and everybody understands what this investment is in your property. It's one of the larger investments, and we understand that you're going to make in your property in your lifetime. So we want to make sure that if there's any questions, you understand the process and what's happening and why we're doing it. Detailed drawings and cost estimates are developed. That's happening also now. Doug mentioned that our plans are down at Ohio EPA for approval. They're doing a review, and we hope to get an approval very soon on those plans. The next step is going to be either we might have another information meeting if we get a lot of questions. If not, we will move on to a public hearing. And the public hearing is a very formal hearing. There'll be a stenographer, the commissioners will be here. It's an opportunity to express objections or endorsements for the project directly to the commissioners who will actually be doing the assessments. We're hoping that we'll be able to send out those notifications in January of 2022, next January. And as part of that notice, you'll receive a tentative assessment. So what the tentative assessment is essentially is the maximum number that each property will be responsible for. So you'll know going into that public hearing what that amount is. It will apply any grants that we've gotten by then. If we get grants after that, we can lower that amount, but that would be the maximum amount that each property would be responsible for. Will show up on that tentative assessment when we receive that in the mail sometime, hopefully in January of next year. So the notice will announce the public hearing, which will be sometime in February. Typically, we give 30 days notice for that public hearing. So February 22 right now is the tentative schedule to have that public hearing. Following the public hearing, we will advertise for bids. Phase 1, Doug mentioned that it's going to be built in 2 phases. So between essentially May of next year and August of 2024, we'll be building about 9,000 feet of sanitary sewers through the neighborhoods. So after all that construction is done, grass is growing, laterals are put in, the property owners each property owner will receive a final assessment notification in the mail. And that final assessment amount will be, it cannot be more than what the tentative assessment is. Typically it's less. And again, if Doug's able, if we're successful with these grant applications, it could be significantly less. We have our fingers crossed on that. But when we receive that final assessment amount, you'll have a couple of options. There's a 30-day cash payment period where you have the option to pay a portion of that assessment in cash up front. You can pay the whole assessment off, or you can pay none of it. And whatever's remaining from what you didn't pay will be placed on your tax duplicate. Okay? What will be the assessment that's placed on the taxes will be, we'll purchase a bond. The county will purchase a bond at an interest rate, and the interest and the assessment amount will be placed on the taxes to be collected over 20 years. So the actual project's cost will be what's assessed to the property taxes. The first payment won't be due until we're estimating January of 2026. So you'll see that the final assessment notification sometime in the spring of 2025, a couple years away yet, and then you'll see the first tax bill in 2026. So as far as the construction and the connection, the contractor that's hired by the city that Doug talked about will install the pipe down the street, also install connections to the right-of-way for each property. Those connections can be placed anywhere that's convenient for each property owner to tie into their septic system. Sometimes you want it on the left side of the property, sometimes on the right side of the property, so you don't have to go under a driveway, or if there's trees in the way, that sort of thing. We can move that anywhere that a property owner wants during construction and during design. Doug, I know, has talked to some of the property owners already, but that can be moved right up to the time that the contractor's putting the pipe in. Our inspectors will typically try to contact you a day or two or a week before they get to your house and try to figure out where you want that lateral, so we can put that in where it's most convenient for you. After the pipe is approved, the homeowner will acquire a permit from the Department of Utilities. That's the fee that Doug talked about, $5,671, something like that. It's on your handout. That permit fee is what pays for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, and also the pump station that gets the waste over to the treatment plant, the pump station down at our Markel Road. So the homeowner, then the property owner, will hire a contractor to make the connection from the house to the right-of-way, and also to abandon the septic system. So that's all I have for the presentation. What we're going to do now is try to answer any general questions that anybody has. This is going to be very informal. We'll take as much time as you want. As we get into more detailed questions about your particular property, we'll break up, and we've got a table at each end with a set of plans on it. We've got a half a dozen or so people here that can answer your questions as best we can. You can also call me during the week, call Doug during the week, and try to get any of those questions answered. That's the purpose of this meeting. That's the purpose of the next couple of months before we have that public hearing, and try to make sure that everybody is able to understand the project and what the process is. So with that, I don't know, you want to, we'll open it up for questions.
Oh, I don't need that, dude. I'm loud enough. You're good.
Actually, the recording won't hear you.
Oh, okay. Hey, I got a question. That you said that the $5,000 permit from the county is to pay for the construction of the wastewater plant and the pump station that's going to be hooked up, but that stuff's already built. Like, the pump station's been put in how many years ago? So I'm just curious how that gets to be $5,000.
Check.
All right, that's a great question. So when we build facilities, wastewater treatment plants or pump stations or pipes, we build them big enough for the next 50 or 100 years. Okay, we don't just build it big enough for that one area. So when we do that, we'll take out a loan to build it. So that, you're right, that the wastewater treatment plant's already built, but it's not paid for yet. So when we built that wastewater treatment plant, we built it big enough to be able to serve the western part of Lake County, central Lake County really, for 50 years. We built a wastewater treatment plant for 20 million gallons a day. Right now, we only need about 10 million gallons a day that we're treating. So we borrowed that money for the next 10 million gallons, and as each person connects to that, they're going to pay a little portion of that. That's the purpose of that connection fee. And it's the same thing with the lift station. The lift station was built during the 306 sewer project. We knew that additional people were going to want to tie into that sanitary sewer and use that pump station. Sure, whatever the case might be, whether they want to, whether they need to, whether they have to use that sanitary sewer. So we built it about 5 times as big as what it needed to be for just that 306 project. And the way we built it and when we paid for it is we borrowed money for 20 years, and we're paying that money back, and that's in order to pay off that loan. Each connection that ties in after that, it pays a portion of that lift station.
I have 2 questions. Mitch, look, I live on Elm Street. One thing that I've been hearing is that Fair Ridge and Timothy are not going to be included into it.
That's correct. Fair Ridge and Timothy were not within the boundaries of the findings and orders area that came from the EPA. So they are not included in the project area.
So are they, if they wanted to be, could they be, or?
Well, Timothy's a private street. It's not public. It's not a public way. So I think there would be some difficulty there.
Okay.
And Fair Ridge was outside the boundaries of the area. Certainly, at some point in the future, if septic systems on Fair Ridge begin to fail to a point that sewer is required, a sewer would be able to be run onto Fair Ridge and tied into this sewer.
Okay. And then my other question is, I know some people live at the bottom of Elm Street, the northernmost part. From what I understand, their septic is below where you would be able to place the pipe. So they're kind of curious. They're trying to figure out, are they going to have to tie in, or, I mean, because they're going to have to pump their waste up to get into the pipe. At least that's what they were told by the surveyor.
Yeah, that's correct. There are some properties that'll have to pump to the connection. We simply can't put the pipe deep enough to serve those lower properties.
I have 2 questions. The first one is the tap-in fee is $5,000+ plus, but besides that, is there an assessment for the length of the pipe that goes across the front of your property?
There is, yeah. There's essentially 3 costs. The one is for the pipe going across the front of your property. The one is for the capacity at the wastewater treatment plant and the pump station, and the other is the cost to connect from the house to the street. And that is, Doug mentioned that earlier. That's the part that will be assessed is right now estimated about $24,000. And then with financing estimated at 5%, I think it came out to $38,000 over 20 years. We're using 5% as a financing number. That's pretty conservative. Right now it's about 3% to sell bonds, but we're not looking at purchasing a bond until 2025. So speaking with our financial experts, I mean, it's hard to guess what it's going to be like 3 or 4 or 5 years from now as far as financing goes. So we're being conservative here. It's probably going to be less. I don't want to tell you it's going to be 1 or 2% and have it be quite a bit more. But 5% is what we typically use on these projects as an estimate because it's so far out in the future. Doug's estimate for construction is also, we're trying to figure out what these contractors are going to charge 3 years from now, for this construction. This process is a lengthy one, so all these estimates are, we're applying some kind of inflation factor to it, and ideally, it's going to be lower than this, but we don't want to come out and tell you something that is going to be significantly less and then have it be more. So, Doug mentioned the grants and that sort of thing was going to chip away at that $24,000 number. coming forward.
My other question is, will someone provide some kind of a checklist for the homeowners so we know what we need to do, when we need to do it, and where we need to go to get it done?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of what we're doing tonight is laying kind of that groundwork, that foundation for what the next steps are. As we get closer, Doug had mentioned that the actual connection date is September of 2025, and you know, when you come in and purchase your permit, that there's a instructions on what has to happen with that.
Through the end, so that I know where to go, what order it needs to be done in, and who I need to see. Something that I can hold in my hand and say, okay, tomorrow I need to do this.
Good question, Mrs. Barr. I just asked Doug the question. Outside of the 13 or so property owners that have an opportunity to deed restrict, put that restriction on their deed to say that they won't split their lot in the future. Outside of that, between now and in the time of tie-in, there's not going to be a whole lot for the residents to do, right? And the tie-in, the first thing that would be selecting that area, that place along the frontage where you want your T to go in. So what would the soonest for anyone that would take place be? To walk with somebody and say, we'd like to have our T there.
That can happen tonight. I mean, you know, while we're talking, it can happen anytime between now and.
Okay. So, do you understand?
Knowing where my gas line is, because my gas line, I
Sure.
have a gas line on one side and a water line on the other, so somebody's going to need to figure out
Good
where a
point.
safe zone is.
Okay. Well, then that'll be part of something we can publish as a checklist, and I think that's a good idea. We have the list of property owners, so thank you. And Doug's saying he's happy to come out and meet with any property owner to help assist, and Joe Finaro will be the same way in terms of where those things are and what to be. I'll get it to you.
Yes, sir. One thing I'd like to ask is the people with an 80-foot lot, are they paying the same amount as the people that has a 200-foot frontage?
That was the frontage question I just asked you. Yeah. So it's per benefit unit. It's per lot, and not necessarily if you've got 500 feet or if you've got 80 feet. The cost is the cost for each individual lot.
Well, the guy with the 80-foot lot, he's getting shorted a little bit, ain't he?
Yeah, so that's one way to look at it, right? And I think, I won't speak to how things normally go, but that is, when you look at projects like this, you either go by benefit unit or you go by that linear footage. And yeah, so someone, is going to get 500 feet potentially, like you said, for a lot less than what someone's going to get 80 feet. But it's, with the lot size differences, we thought this was probably the most appropriate and fairest way to go about it.
Next, I've got another question. The next thing is, how can it be justified for almost $275 a foot to have this sewer put in?
How's that justified?
Yeah.
I'll turn to the construction experts.
Just to expand on your first question real quick, this is assessed based on each house. We're assuming that each property is benefiting the same. But if somebody had a lot big enough that they could split and get 2 lots out of it, then they would be charged for 2 benefit units. And that's what Doug talked about earlier. You can deed restrict your lot and so you can only put 1 house on the lot, then you'd get just 1 benefit unit. But if there is a large lot that can be split into 2 or 3 or 4 lots, then they would get charged for 2 or 3 or 4 lots. The second question is $275 a foot. That's the going rate right now. We bid out projects every month, 5 or 6, 7, 8, 10 a year, and those are what the costs are. Hopefully they'll come in a little bit less than that. Again, Doug did the estimate, and it was based on what kind of prices we're getting today, and then trying to figure out what the price is going to be at the middle of 2022, so almost a year from now, and then that second phase in 2023. So it'll be ultimately be what the actual costs are. So all these projects will be competitively bid. It's a public bid. So if the estimates, if the contractors come in and it's half as much, then that assessment will be half as much.
One more question, sir. Can you get your own contractor to run it from city back to your house, or do you have to have a county contractor?
You can hire any contractor you want that's licensed with the county. So we've got about 150 or 200 contractors that are currently licensed with us. The license process is not terribly difficult, so if you have a contractor that you like, that you want them to do the work, ask them to get licensed with us, and then you can choose anybody that you want.
Where's the outflow pipe going?
This project will start at 306 and...
I mean down Elm Street.
Pardon?
Down Elm Street, where's the pipe going?
Oh, where in the street?
How are you going down the ravine? To Eisenhower. To Eisenhower. I live at the last house on the street. I'm kind of concerned about that.
On Elm?
Yeah.
So we're not going to open cut that big slope. We're going to directionally bore from the top of the hill to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, however the contractor chooses to do it. But it's going to be a directional bore. There won't be any tree clearing on the slope or digging through the slope.
And whose property is it? 8925 or
8933.
8933?
Yeah.
We can take a look at that after the meeting if you want to come up.
Okay.
I'm Michelle Musk and live on Bluff. I wanted to know if Bluff is going to get the sewers.
Bluff is not included in the findings and orders area. However, there are two properties on Bluff. The corner parcels at Maple, we have frontage on Maple, that are included in the total property count. Because of their frontage on Maple, they'll be required to connect.
That is my house.
Okay.
So that would be, I would have to pay for tax, I would have to connect to this,
Yes.
to the pipe? Okay.
You guys couldn't sit closer together?
I'll work my way up.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Chappell. Hi, Doug. So tonight's the first time I'm hearing about this deed restriction. I know you and I have talked. So if I sold my house after I did all this stuff to connect my lots, can the next person, is that for the next person down the line?
Yes.
Can they split that up?
No, and that's the reason for the deed restriction. The deed restriction filed with the county auditor will run with the property. Whether you sell it, the next owner will also be restricted.
Okay, because that's the first time I've heard that term. So, okay.
And Mrs. Chappell, did you get a second letter in the city's correspondence a week or two ago related to a deed restriction?
I did not.
Okay, so if you didn't, those letters went out to those individuals that were identified as those potential property splits. So if you didn't get one, then you're not part of that issue.
I mean, I had to get a whole new resurvey that cost $2,200.
You have to get resurveyed?
I had to get a resurvey to get my lots combined.
So you've combined your lots already then?
Right, but it cost me $2,200.
Okay.
And other people could do it for free. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, but you had two separate lots?
Three
Okay,
lots.
so this is something separate. This is if a single lot is large enough that by our code has the square footage and linear footage or frontage could later on be split. Those were the property owners we're talking about now. In your case, consolidating a lot to avoid those two or three assessments, that's something separate.
Well, right, but it could be split later. can it be split later by another owner, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, we can talk about individual lots. We have the plots up here if you'd like. That would be fine afterwards.
A couple questions. I own a property at the corner of Eisenhower and Saxon. And I noticed, number one, Saxon's not included in this.
Right, so Saxon is not included.
But it pretty much is the same road. It just has a different name.
Correct.
So why would I be forced to pay this
Because-
if the people on the same road aren't?
So yeah, so the sewer is going past the houses on Eisenhower, right? And so by virtue of that, by state law at that point, because that pipe goes past there, they become part of the assessment. Did I say that correctly? Yeah.
But the septics on Eisenhower are not failing.
A lot of septics up in Old Town above are not failing either. That's
So do I have to tap in even if my septic is fine?
if the sewer runs past your house, yes. Again, we didn't come up with the findings and orders. That's an EPA issue. Is that the right answer? EPA drew the boundary, right? Because the project goes past their houses. That's correct, right?
There was 4 houses on Eisenhower, and I'm one of them, that has aeration systems. I know for a fact that these 4 aeration systems working perfectly. And on top of it, when they had the people come around, you were supposed to call in and make an appointment to have their septic system checked. I was the only one, these 2 of us had their septic system checked, working fine. No leaks, no water, I didn't have to talk me around or nothing. Right, like he said, all these people on Saxon, these probably septic tanks down there ain't been pumped in 20 years. Now, is this water going in the river too? How can you justify stuff like that?
Yeah, so how the health department identified where the effluent was coming from and going from, and in terms of the storm drainage, that I don't know, but that is the boundary in the pathway that they were, chasing, I guess. To
Just so we can keep the questions moving in and sharing, if we can, I'd be happy to come down before you in just a moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the answer for that. The city received orders from the EPA to get this certain group of houses sewered. If next year there's a complaint or if there's evidence that there's failing somewhere else, then I think there could be another project to include another street, and that could continue. And wherever there's going to be, wherever the EPA or the health district finds issues, that could be the consequence. They didn't find it in this case. I don't know. We didn't do the investigation. We received the orders. So.
Carol Martz here. Question, Mayor, on the financing for the city's contribution. Can you provide a little more detail around the $450,000? How much of that is a loan versus a grant? And then if these grants are not awarded, what happens? Is that burden then put upon the homeowner?
It's $250 grant, $150 loan for that $400,000. And what was your second question?
If the additional grants are not awarded, is that burden then shifted to the homeowner?
Yeah, yes. And unfortunately, and again, that is flat out why this group will be working so hard to find those funding opportunities, grant opportunities from now until 2025.
Thank you, Mayor Potter, Matt Scholes, Council at Large here. Just a couple questions in terms of the formalization of the location of the lateral, and I would suggest that there would be a little bit more paperwork done on behalf of the residents so that can be formalized and we have a record of that, not only for our records going forward in any future construction in the area, but also, you know, people are busy during the summer and during the construction season. It's not going to be that easy to make that quote-unquote connection. Secondly, you know, I appreciate all the work you've done in trying to secure grants to help the folks. What also has been done on the state level with our very own Jerry Serino?
Yeah, so Councilman Schultz, you were at the meeting when Jerry Serino came to City Council a few months ago. Jerry Serino assured us that he would be, you know, trying to crack the code for any additional dollars and funding that we can get throughout this process. What I will say is, and I think I've shared this with everyone at different times, you know, beyond what the applications and grants that Doug's been working on and scouring and looking for, I myself applied for grants through Sherrod Brown's office and Dave Joyce's office as part of their 2022 budget. We are on, now, always cautionary when I say these things because you don't want to give anyone false hope, right? But we are on Sherrod Brown's submission for his 2022 budget as part of the $2 million grant. Again, that means the federal government's got to get their stuff together and actually pass a budget. And as part of that budget passage, they would have to include that and authorize that. But you have to start somewhere. So Brown's office was good enough to get us in as part of that grant offering or grant application. So we are on that. I just verified again today. I looked on the website to make sure that we're still part of that request. But again, the federal government's got to get their stuff together and pass their budget.
Okay, so just a couple questions. Courtney from Joseph Street, nice to see everybody. So for some of the people that were questioning about a checklist, are you guys going to have a list of reputable contractors that might be offering bids to help out a lot of us to have a lower cost to tie in? Because I don't know how many people realize you have to pay that up front, or maybe companies that will offer financing to help people as well, just so that nobody gets scammed or somebody knocking on the door like, I'll do it for $2,000 and then it's not done.
I think what we can do is provide a list of registered contractors with the city and with the county, but we can't necessarily suggest that one contractor or another.
I feel you.
Right?
So if anybody wants to go in together with contractors, we are more than happy to have a conversation about that to see if somebody's willing to do it cheaper for everybody. I know that there's a lot of people that have their own contractors. We also have friends too. I think it'd be worth looking into because we've had it priced a couple times and the price differences were disgusting. So if anybody wants to go in, you can contact my husband or I or Jen or anybody. Next question is for the people on Saxton or that were worried about that. So once everybody's tied in, who's from the EPA? You EPA guy?
No EPA.
No, you're a city. So we don't have any, so will the EPA be looking to reassess whether or not waste is still going into the river? Because I know that a lot of people did not get their septics checked when this was happening. Therefore, this is why we're here now. So instead of fixing the people that were failing, if there are people that are failing on Saxton and going into the river, are they going to also be looked at too, or is this a one-time and the EPA is gone?
Well, I think Randy touched on that earlier with one of the prior questions. If complaints come up and issues come up in other areas, that could put other streets in the same
at risk. How do you complain? Like, how did that complaint come about? I'm just curious. I didn't live here when that complaint came about, so.
I wasn't the engineer when the complaint
Yeah,
came
I don't know,
about
like,
either,
was someone
so.
like, ooh, I smell something. I just didn't know if that was, like, does the EPA regularly test water? That kind of stuff.
I'm going to pass the mic over to Chris Lockstrom.
Oh,
with
thank
the
you.
Health
Yeah, I just
Department,
didn't know how that
and,
got worked. Thanks.
He can help out with this question.
Cool, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll try to explain it the best that I can. Everything that we do when it comes to complaints is based on neighbors complaining about something, okay? This all started through our stormwater program. Someone had complained about one of the stormwater discharges being really, really odorous. We did some sampling, we started looking, and it kind of steamrolled into doing many inspections at many houses and trying to get into a lot of houses in the main assessment area, okay? We weren't on Eisenhower and Saxon that much, from what I remember, okay, in doing that. But everything was derived really from complaints. So we have an O&M program that we've started, you know, and that is still ongoing, and people are getting enrolled. And people are having their systems inspected. People that have mechanical systems are already having service providers and some of those things, and we're still getting complaints in through that, but it's still based on complaints. We don't just go to somebody's house or like canvass neighborhoods to look for complaints.
So,
it's all
but once
based on
this is done, you would think that you guys would go back and recheck to make sure the problem's resolved, correct?
Yeah, our sewage program is going to be ongoing. So like if we have areas that aren't, you know, there's going to be somebody that may walk down the river and all of a sudden find something that has been discharging for a long time.
Oh. So we have no idea whether or not this will actually fix the problem. We're just kind of hoping.
Well, the sewer is going to fix the problem for those that tie in, okay? Hopefully the way the assessment or the project goes, anybody that would be outside of that, that's part of why Randy had talked about the capacity, so that some of those other streets, if they become problems, because we have complaints, there's an option instead of making people fix septic systems or replace septic systems to get them tied into the sewer, because once they're tied into the sewer, there's no issue with.
Well, you have to tie in though if it runs down your street. That's the law, correct?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that is the law. If a sewer runs down your street, you have to tie in Lake County, at least I know that's the law.
Correct. Correct.
So I'm just worried about the environment, I guess, if whoever complained that the problem's actually solved by everybody getting the sewers. That's all I wanted to make sure. Not that I want people in Saxton to totally pay more money, but, you know,
Right.
just asking. So nobody actually goes back and checks to make sure that the problem is resolved.
Well, yes, we will, because we have a stormwater program that we have our staff goes out and they do all kinds of inspections.
Okay, because I'm just kind of mad because I'm one of the people that let you on my property and there was nothing wrong with my 100-year-old septic tank.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of pissed about it. So
all of those same
which I know
outfalls-
is not your fault, and I know it's not you guys' fault either. So I'm sorry that you have to stand up and kind of take the repercussions for all this, but I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure that we know the problem's resolved, and if it's not, you guys will continue to investigate to be able to continue to have clean water.
We will, because
Okay.
any of the stormwater outfalls, and what I mean by outfall is anywhere there's stormwater that discharges into a creek, river, or stream, we are still going to have those in our program through the stormwater department, through the county, and what the health department provides to the stormwater department. So that'll continue to be ongoing.
Cool.
And then we'll have an O&M program through the health department's septic program, as well as any repairs, replacements, or any of those things or complaints that would come in that we would handle through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate it.
Jan Hagan at Elm Street. I'd like to know two questions. How close can your sewer line be to your property line? And I don't feel real confident on knowing where to put the tie-in in. Is there going to be someone who can support and give us a good idea how to do that, because we're not a plumber?
Yeah, and like the mayor mentioned, I'll be happy to come out and meet with any resident individually, myself and Joe Finaro, and we can take a walk around the property, look at where your septic is, and help you out with what may be the best route to put your tie-in. My number and my email address are both on the city's website. Feel free to call me during the week, email me anytime. How close to the property line was the question? Probably about 5 feet. Are there any more general questions?
Sorry, man, I'm taking all the questions. So just to be clear, like I've really worked in sewer, my whole for 14 years now. I'm licensed through the EPA. I kind of know a little bit. And you said you have the foresight to build these bigger pumps and all that stuff for the pump station to incorporate all these other homes, all of us in here. You didn't have maybe the foresight to maybe apply for some more grant money ahead of time? Because out of all the projects I've seen working for 14 years in sewer department for a very nearby municipality, I've never once seen the cost of the entire project lumped on residents and assessments. Typically, that's all done through grant money, and then all the residents are asked to do is to just pay to tap in with like a contractor. So that's my question.
And that's a good point. And so that was, long before myself or Doug Courtney being here as part of the city administration. I think you bring up a good point. As we look out ahead, maybe it doesn't help you guys today, but as we talk about the other streets that could come online later on down the road, obviously the first and primary effort on the city right now is to help get dollars for you guys, right, for this project. But is there an opportunity for us to, okay, can we apply for another $2 or $4 million, and the city will take the initiative to go out and do that project if we get that money to head, some of these problems off of the past in the future. And I couldn't agree more. But right now, our first and foremost, so I don't know why if that wasn't done, and maybe it's a situation where unless you have a project designed, ready to go, you can apply for, instead of just saying, hey, I want to apply for $5 million and then I'll put a sewer in somewhere. But I guess the shorter answer is our primary focus has to be for you guys today. But if there is an opportunity,
So how many grants have you applied for up till today? Because you said that you're going to start applying now until then, but how many have you applied for till today since you've known about this? And have you applied to like the EPA for any sort of loans? Because I know for a fact the EPA gives out a lot of money every year for things like this.
So to date, we've applied for 3 grants, 2 through Ohio Public Works Commission. The one for the phase 1 work was awarded. The one for the phase 2 work was not awarded. And we've applied for the American Recovery Plan Act money. That one is still pending. The thing about these grants is a lot of them pop up at the last minute, especially now with the federal government providing, like the ARPA money came up last minute. We didn't know about that grant opportunity until early summer, and we got the grant application in the end of August. So, like the mayor said, he's working with State Senator Serino, and we're looking at H2 Ohio money potentially for submitting, and so we're.
What are the dollar amounts for these grants that you're applying for?
The dollar amounts for the ARPA funds that went in late August was 50% of the construction cost, 50% of the design cost, and 50% of the owner's upfront cost, which was that $10,000 number. Okay. So we applied for 50% of each of those categories. So it was a sizable grant request. So, and that's all grant money. If the city is successful in getting that grant money, that comes right off the bottom line because it doesn't have to be paid back.
And do we have somebody that is writing these grants that is educated in writing grants?
What?
Because I know you had asked publicly if anybody was versed in writing grants, if they could get a hold of you, and I feel like that's a little nerve-wracking. We just want to make sure that whoever's applying for these grants knows what they're doing.
Yeah, so Doug's been doing this for 20 years with his engineering firm. When I was applying for grants through Dave Joyce's office and through Sherrod Brown's office, I think 2 through Sherrod Brown's and 3 through Dave Joyce's office, I was going to correct Doug and say we've actually applied for 5 more, and to varying degrees. I was applying through the Dave Joyce one for sidewalks as part of this, right? So yeah, to your question, that was literally through an online portal through their websites. There wasn't much for me to screw up, right? It was plug in the dollar amounts, put your narrative in, right? Yeah. No, it's a good question.
Because I do think that this is a huge burden on the homeowners, and I think that, right now we're in a different real estate market, and it's crazy But down the line, that is going to change. Historically, it always does. And with this kind of burden on the homeowners, you know, it is going to be harder to sell our house. I have a little 1,200 square foot house that's maybe worth $170, and now my taxes are going to be over $5,000 with really no upgraded city services. It's just to replace something that maybe didn't even need to be replaced. So when you use the term, this is an investment in my house, I don't feel like it's an investment. I'm not going to see an extra $25,000 on the sale of my house because I'm putting in, you know, a sewer system. It's not going to happen.
When we met the other day, I asked if we could find another word other than benefit unit, because, right, that's the word used in the business. But to your point, when I'm a resident, I'm a homeowner, you know, and faced with these exorbitant costs, I don't see that as a benefit to me, but that is the kind of standardized term for that. So, you know.
Somebody else said this. We know this is a big investment in your home, and it's really not. We aren't going to see anybody come and offer us $25,000 more for our homes because we just put in new sewer lines. As a matter of fact, it's going to be a deterrent somewhere down the line when things settle down in this market, which is when we're going to start paying. And they don't want the exorbitant taxes on the house, or it will kick them out of being able to afford the house altogether because now their monthly obligation would be more to even purchase the home.
And you're not wrong, and that has to be that is the concern from my office and where I sit, right? We don't want to be driving good folks out of their homes and out of our neighborhoods. I can't imagine the impact it's going to have on some people. Right. Okay. So I think this is a good time. Oh.
Just a quick question. How did it happen in the first place? I'm kind of new to this. I'm not even in this district, or ward rather. But if this gentleman's saying, and I have no reason to doubt what he's saying, that usually you only pay for the tie-in, how did this happen? Like.
So in the very beginning, I don't know if you were here, but I walked through a quick timeline. 2014, complaints were made, investigations into that neighborhood and into some of the sites that were being complained about were looked into. By 2017, they were doing smoke testing. The health department was sending out literature, mailers to all the residents in that area, asking to allow them access to their property to be able to test. It was a pretty low response rate. And so ultimately the health department, when they have that low participation rate, they turn it over to the EPA, and when that happens, you know, you're handcuffed.
So when the EPA comes in, it's just, don't you have to, like, I mean, you weren't in office, but doesn't something have to be signed to give them that permission, or no? Like,
when the EPA comes in
to do whatever it is they do, did they just
well,
come in and
the EPA doesn't, I mean, the EPA takes the health department's findings, right? And they go through that data, and they look at the area, and they look at those streets, and they say, okay, here's the boundaries. This one failed, that one failed, that one failed, that one failed. We're going to make this the sewer project, and the orders then become, you have to do this, fix all. You can't fix septics. You run these sewers, put in the new sewer system in this case, and you have to do it by such and such date. Those were the orders in this case.
I'm assuming it was the previous administration. Then they get that and they just sign it. There's like no negotiation.
No, there was. So yeah, that's one of the pieces was So we first signed findings and orders in 2019, but then the administration also passed an ordinance to negotiate, and it was supposed to be one or the other, not both of those things. So in January, when I took office, we were contacted by the EPA, and the EPA said, hey, listen, we've got to do one or the other. Glad we caught this before we certified it. We asked then, could we negotiate, right? And so instead of 3-year terms, we ended up with, I guess, 5-year terms, right? Or 6. Yeah. Well, construction in 5 years. Yeah. By the time the orders were signed on by the city, yes. Yeah. From 2020. The clock started last August, yes.
So I just have a quick question. So this was an issue that the EPA and the Department of Health found issues in the sewer water, right? And to my understanding, there's only a few properties that actually had the issue. At what point was the failure, and whose ball that dropped that didn't make those 12 people fix their septic systems to the point where we all now have to pay this money. I know I'm not saying it's you, but that for those people who weren't here, that's what happened. Is that not correct?
Yeah, so how...
So why doesn't the city, I know the city doesn't have the money, but why doesn't the city pick up more of this burden if they drop the ball or somebody dropped the ball? Because I didn't drop it. My septic works.
Right, and ultimately...
Sorry again.
No, it's okay. Ultimately, it was on each property owner when they received that letter or the second letter from the county, and it sounds like you guys did that and responded, right? But for those that didn't, why was there not a stronger worded letter from the city? Not sure. Did you have...
Yeah. During the health department's investigation, one of the things other than smoke testing that we did is we contracted with Lake County Sewer and we cameraed the storm. And during that investigation, we counted abundance of connections that were in that storm. Based on the sampling that we collected, and we collected over a dozen samples, we had E. coli ranging from just under 2,000 counts per 100 mLs all the way up to 750,000. And that was going down Caudry, north on Caudry, all the way down north on Elm. So there was an abundance of sewage in the storm. We sent out notices to all the residents in Old Town Kirtland asking permission to assess their septics. There was very little turnout. Most of the residents would not or did not permit us on their properties to do that complete investigation. So at that point, we turned over all of our evidence to EPA. They conducted their own individual assessment and sampling as well and confirmed our findings. And they're the ones that determine the boundaries of those orders, of those locations to be sewered. So Kirtland is part of their, what would you call it, Randy? They're like a co-permittee. The county applies for an NPDES permit. That permit allows for a discharge of stormwater into the state's receiving streams. Our stormwater department goes out and samples these outfalls to see what's being discharged into our receiving streams. When they find an illicit discharge, they backtrack up to determine where that illicit discharge is, and then those findings are turned over to the city. So we were in contact with the city of Kirtland.
Kevin, did you say that we got 3 grants or we only applied for 3 grants?
So Mr. Courtney has applied for, Doug, did you say 3 or 4 grants? And then I applied through 3 through Dave Joyce's office and 2 through Sherry Brown's office, so whatever that total is.
So we've received 3 already and you applied for 3 more?
No, we've received 1 grant from the Ohio Public Works, right, for $250,000. Part of that, though, is the city's city loan of $150,000, a low-interest loan. So really, in total, only $400,000 thus far.
Which is
minimal.
Nothing.
Right. It's
nothing.
A little more than 10% of the project, right?
Right. So it's kind of disappointing, I'll tell you, that like the city isn't doing more to apply for more grants, and that it's been a handful of grants, it sounds like, at most, that you've applied for. Now, I understand that a lot of them are last minute, like I think Mr. Courtney said. Are you going to continue to watch for these and apply for them up to that final assessment?
Yeah, so 100%. And so what Doug's office has, right, is these things constantly come through their channels, and I mean, this is what they do, right? So when they see an opportunity, they then, like Doug said, a grant opportunity in June, it's got to be filed by the end of August. Doug had that all together and filed by August, right? So we're in the running for that grant. So yeah, sometimes it's, maybe there's an annual, right, like the OPWC, and you work to score well on that. and then sometimes it's more of a, hey, this thing just came available. With all the dollars being released from the federal government back to the state, into the county, hopefully we see some of that, right?
So is there a point person at the city that is looking for these grants on a weekly, monthly, daily basis for us, or?
Doug Courtney would certainly be that person because by virtue of what they do, and this is, he's in that world and in that business, constantly in contact with the county. But I'm always got my eyes and ears open as well.
Thank you.
And truthfully, I mean, that's how you stumble across things like opportunities, through the congressman's office and the senator's office, right?
Mayor, with the various side conversations going on,
Yeah.
I think it's getting a little harder to.
We'll wrap it up,
keep
and anybody wants
do
to
you
come
wanna-
up individually? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, so thanks everybody. We're going to wrap up the public forum now, and if you have individual questions, please feel free to come on up and ask those to us. So thanks everybody for coming out.